Okay,
So
this
yeah,
is pretty crazy. Hold on. So you're moving a tooth in 3D space
yeah,
and it's adjusting your 2D mockup.
correct.
Holy crap, that's pretty awesome.
You can do it vice versa. So if you realize that there's something you don't like in the 2D image and you make changes here, then you can see how it changes in 3D space simultaneously.
Daniel, I don't know about you. I always ask for scans as well if I can get them. If I have
Absolutely.
three-dimensional intraoral scans along with this,
Absolutely.
I can pull those up and see exactly what, I can make a better educated determination of, how far can I bring out this buccal corridor physically, right? And make that determination here. Whereas, if we put these teeth way out here, we know that that's not going to be a realistic outcome from what we have.
Hello, Rob Lejeune, Ben Guilford, Daniel Pertal here to solve some 3D problems related to predictable aesthetic outcomes when a patient wants anterior aesthetics. They want anterior veneers or anterior crowns. They want that smile makeover. So we have a patient here, and if we just prep the teeth and send it to our designer or send it to our lab, how do we know that the patient is going to love the outcome? And if we're just crossing our fingers and hoping that the designer nails the case, maybe they get it right. And maybe Mrs. Jane Doe is thrilled with the outcome. But what if she's not? What if she does not like her incisal edge design, or the teeth are a little bit too big and square, or maybe they're too short? And Daniel, maybe talk about how often are you guys kind of doing redos or remakes with doctors because we just didn't get enough instruction, or we didn't know what the patient wanted? How critical is that to know what does the patient want before we start the case?
The amount of remakes is actually quite high, and it's wholly unnecessary. If we could establish better communication between doctor and patient, and then doctor and lab, then we can come up with, we can try to fulfill the patient's expectations from the very beginning, avoiding as many remakes as possible. So little pieces of information, like for example, like Ben is showing here, a good quality picture, that's gold. And then maybe the patient has ideas, maybe they saw, I don't know, Jennifer Lawrence's mouth or something like that, and they really like those teeth. Send pictures of, or ask the patient to bring pictures of the teeth they've seen, so that we can try to match that as closely as possible. And then going to the minutia, that was in the details, right? So if you could tell me, I want them this long, that wide, et cetera, that will be very, very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately a lot of dentistry out there is like, hey, we'll sling it to the lab and let them create this beautiful smile, and not realize maybe some of the communication that is entailed there. There's a lot of legwork on the front end for the doctor, really, and that's kind of what, Daniel and I are going to show you today. There's smile design that we can kind of work on that you can do in office for better expectations. The more information you can get from the patient, or the doctor can get from the patient, the better, right? I mean, it's hard to build a foundation without knowing, kind of the overall or the end, right? The outcome of the end. So if no one knows that without questions in the beginning, then we're all kind of just shooting in the dark, which I believe, increases remakes and things like that could be solved in the beginning.
Yeah, if we can begin with the end in mind and we can show the patient an outcome, a likely outcome, then the odds of the seating appointment going really, really well and the patient just loving the smile, how it looks, how it feels, it's exactly what they want. And so we're going to talk today about smile design and 3D mockups and the value of that. And we're going to show that in both 3Shape and Exocad. So today we want to show and highlight the process of doing smile design and 3D mockups in 3Shape, and also smile design and 3D mockups in Exocad. It's not necessarily a competition, but maybe the competitive spirit will be unavoidable. So Ben, you get a case with these pictures and you're going to begin a 3Shape smile design. Walk us through that. Walk us through the process of how you begin 3Shape smile design, and what are the initial steps you're going to do to give this doctor a two-dimensional photo to gain patient acceptance, or maybe it's patient excitement to accept the case and move forward with treatment. Walk us through that.
Sure. So this is a pretty simple tool to use within 3Shape. It's in 3Shape Unite. It's called Smile Design. And really all you need to start is one photo. But like we've talked about before, at least these two photos to start. So we do see some teeth. We also have a retracted view as well that we can use. So I'm literally just going to start with a couple photos. And within 3Shape, we have some landmarks that we can move around, which will actually take care of the interpupillary line, so we can kind of get that measurement right off the bat. And then what the software really has us do is just edit a lip line, and we can move all of this to kind of get our horizontal exactly where we're looking here.
So identify the pupils,
feature.
Trace the lip.
Exactly. So we're basically just making a window so we can align the photos correctly. So you can see here that we've aligned these two spots on here, and we've actually overlaid the two together. So now that we're in the same spot, I can switch between photos of the retracted as well as just the normal smile. So it kind of just throws out this mock-up right here to begin with based on where we have placed those points in the beginning. You can scroll through different libraries through here that have different shapes. Kind of like Daniel said before, when we're talking about information from the patient, that initial picture could be great for us to go off of, whether it be an oval. There's some different smile guides out there that you can discuss with your patients. Enhanced, natural. We have a book as well, right, Rob, that we kind of go by.
Yeah, there's some fabulous smiles or LVI smile design. I mean, there's some picture-based incisal edge and overall tooth morphology smile design. I mean, really, if the doctor just gives us an image, gives the designer an image and saying, hey, here's the shape, length, width of the case, then now you're off to the races.
Hey,
Sure.
Ben, question. How does the software determine where to put that proposal?
So that is literally going off the landmarks that we marked originally. So when we aligned the teeth, it's taking this initial setup is putting it right within that window of the teeth. So when we align that, then that imposes the midline off of that, which we can move that if we like. But that's just giving us all of our initial reference points of where to put that. So, I'll go through and kind of play with this exactly. I do want to stick within boundaries. Again, this is a great tool. Sometimes we'll go off of photos, and then, a patient does bring in Jennifer Hudson and is like, hey, I want to look like this. And obviously everyone has limitations, right? Sizing, or even with the retracted view, which I do like to have, I can look at tissue levels, and that's a conversation to have with a doctor, or, if a doctor's doing this, or an assistant, to discuss with patient. Obviously that's going to require some more treatment planning, correct? So we may want to raise gingival heights here. We may not want to. But again, it's a great communication tool, really, from doctor to patient, to go through that and kind of see the possibilities of it. So with all that being said, I do kind of like to stay as close to possible here. So meaning tooth size. If I leave these out here, that may not be a realistic result, right? Daniel, I don't know about you. I always ask for scans as well if I can get them. If I have three-dimensional intraoral scans along with this,
absolutely,
I can pull those up and see exactly what, I can make a better educated determination of, how far can I bring out this buccal corridor physically, right? And make that determination here. Whereas, if we put these teeth way out here, we know that that's not going to be a realistic outcome from what we have. So again, I kind of keep these in. Go ahead, Rob.
Ben, did you get a scan with this case?
I did get a scan with this case. Yeah.
How would you look at that scan here? Can you overlay the scan into Smile Design to check a three-dimensional view?
So I don't do that in Smile Design. That's for the two-dimensional, but when I get to the 3D mockup, I can actually pull these photos into the 3D mockup. So I don't have best of both worlds, meaning I can't put the 2D in the 3D and rotate them all together, but I can have either or. So in the two-dimensional, no, I don't really use the three-dimensional scan, but when I get into the design portion of it, I can overlay the two-dimensional picture on top of that. Also, another note, which is nice to have over here, the different style of libraries also correspond with the libraries that I have in the design studio. So if the patient decides on this, let's say this Matt Roberts library from here, then I can use that same library within 3Shape, knowing that ultimately the size and shape of the teeth are going to be about the same, or the style,
Nice.
at least the
So
characteristics.
Smile Design libraries correspond with the dental system libraries in 3Shape. That's pretty cool.
You have some other cool features in here as far as, you can change shades. You can lighten the shade. You can match a shade within. We can also do some custom contouring in here if we want. So if I wanted to change this specific margin to the actual margin of the tooth, I don't find that super important at this point, unless you do have that conversation with the patient as far as tissue recontouring or things like that, if that's needed. Ultimately, we're really just going to show this photo, so I'm not showing tissue. Or if you do have a patient with a high smile line, then I definitely do want to trace those in there so I can really truly get an accurate look to that. Another cool feature I like within here is I can add multiple designs. So let's say I wanted to do one without tissue recontouring and then do another one with the tissue recontouring. Then I can literally just copy this, add a new design, and then copy that separately. So it's really pretty simple to add separate or different. We could even go from 4 teeth to, 8 teeth. Why we don't do 6. Again, just quick communication tools within. Then once we get past where we're going to go, this as far as placement of the teeth, this is where we can play with shade. We can go with the natural color. Actually, these tabs, when I go to natural, that's actually going to affect the teeth of the lower. So let's say we design the teeth and we decided that we do like the shade of the upper. We can also match that with the lower as well. So this case, upper smile design with bleaching on the mandible, potentially. But again, just kind of opening up different tools of communication as a visual, which is very powerful for a patient to see that. This is also something.
If a doctor wanted to show a couple different views, a couple different shades to help, the patient visually see what would bleach look like versus maybe what would an A1, A2 look like.
Definitely. And then at the end of this software, at least, basically you'll get a two-dimensional picture, right? It'll have a before and an after. Of course, this is a big decision for patients. This may be something that's quick and easy. It's low cost for the dentist to print this picture out, for Jane here to go show John at home, right? And discuss.
So
even
Ben,
changes, things like that.
If a doctor wanted you to train him or train his staff on how to do smile design themselves,
yes,
how long would it take to train them how to get comfortable with the tools and do their own smile design?
Yeah, I think really a full walkthrough would take about an hour. I think there's also going to be some follow-up on that, right? Just with anything, but it's actually pretty simple to get into.
Awesome. So just so our doctors know, we're happy, Ben is happy to design for you, or if you want us to train your staff how to design in 3Shape, we could do that too. So Ben, anything else to show here?
Absolutely.
As you wrap up this case?
Nope. From here, so what would happen is I would send that, or, the doctor would print those off. I can send this back to the doctor for his analysis. So, if you wanted me to design it, I can absolutely do that and then just send it right back to you. Therefore, you would have the information to share with the patient. But again, it's also a great communication tool to have for the final. So these are the three-dimensional scans, if we want to jump right into that. But
well, let's let let's let Daniel show the 2D smile design in Exocad.
Go through that.
So,
Okay.
Daniel, I'm sure you can't help yourself.
Oh, come on.
Any 2D Exocad smile design features that you would like to say are either similar or maybe different than 3Shape in what you just saw, and maybe just share your screen and start to show us.
So there's actually a big difference, and I find what Ben has shown in 3Shape pretty useful. Now, Exocad has done it to where you can only do your smile design, or I guess you should. The suggested workflow is with the scans. So Exocad wants you to address both the 2D and the 3D subject at once. And so by the time you submit a preview, going to be that there's much less guesswork as to whether this is viable in the patient's mouth or not. So let me go through the process here. Let me show my screen real quick. All right. So this is how the order form is set up. Just to give a quick kind of lay the foundation for it. So for any smile design that is being done, obviously pre-op, then I want to use the restoration type called mockup. It gives me a lot of freedom as to what I can do after the design is done, whether it's going to turn into crowns, maybe provisionals, maybe just a model. All those things I can derive from this restoration type specifically, even snap-ons if I wanted to. So I'm going to, as you can see, I worked on the case previously. All right. So one of the things that I like to do is to bring in all of my scans into one location to make sure everything is in one place. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to follow the workflow. Now, I do deviate from the workflow at this point. So Exocad now has this option to do segmentation, tooth segmentation. So it kind of extracts tooth shapes and allows you to use those later if you want to, if you want to use them. Or you can jump directly to the smile create. Now, I'm an odd one in this sense. I don't like to use the smile creator at this point where the software suggests, because the tools inside of it for detail working is that they're clunkier. Okay, so I like to progress through the design process. So the software wants to do kind of a block out of the model, again, because it doesn't know what we're going to do with this mockup. So it's just making us go through this process. And then we get to place our tooth shapes here. So it asks for a distal and a distal contact of, 6 and also 11. And then it just gives you like a quick layout. Now you can change your tooth shapes here with whatever you may have installed. Not that I have anything to do with this, but Eric Sosa with this green design, I really like those tooth shapes. And so once I get them in here, and I get to play with different tools within the software that allows me to place this teeth where I think it should be. And what I want to do is kind of get them in the ballpark. Obviously, I'm not basing this off of anything else but the scan data. And let's just say that I'm happy enough with this. Okay. Once I get to this point, then I like to launch the smile creator. So in Exocad, I can go into expert mode. Inside of tools, I'll have the smile creator option. And then I get to launch the smile creator workflow when I want to, not when the software thinks I should. So it gives me a little bit of freedom to come up with my own workflow. So
how does that work, Daniel?
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt.
No,
Quick
no,
question.
please. Yeah.
3Shape user here. Don't use Exocad.
Right. Yeah.
So when you do that, when you go to Smile Creator, does that open up a separate window? Is that like a totally different module? 3Shape has different modules, right?
Yeah.
So like a design module or a manager, or is that all done within the same workflow that you're?
It is all done within the same workflow. So for example, Smile Creator is a separate module that you have to purchase.
Okay.
So it is very similar to 3Shape in that sense. But what Exocad allows me to do is to utilize the tools in whatever order I want. So I can literally come up with my own workflow and say, this is the way that I like to do things, even though the software tells you, no, you should do them this way. You can say, well, I don't care what you suggest, because I think this makes it a little more comfortable, makes more sense for me.
Daniel knows best.
This is great.
Right.
Right. So the two, no matter how much you jump around, they don't interfere with each other when you go back and forth.
Correct.
Okay.
Because it's all within the same instance of the software and within the same workflow.
So, Daniel, this makes perfect sense. If you're getting a two-dimensional photo and a 3D scan, that you would start with the 3D mock-up first to kind of see what's realistic. However, if you don't get a 3D scan, then you can still just do a two-dimensional smile design, yes?
You can, but I just don't think it's the. I would counsel my doctor strongly against that, because what could happen is that now I create this beautiful looking picture, and then it's not viable because the patient's midline is somewhere else, or something goes wrong, and we can't deliver that, and now the patient's going to be really mad because you set expectations really high, and there's no way for you to deliver.
So, in your opinion, it's required,
Yes.
according to your opinion, to do both 2D pictures and 3D scan. So that way you have confidence that the design output, well, when we're going to prep and design on the teeth, is achievable backing into the two-dimensional picture.
Correct.
Okay.
Otherwise, again, because that's the way that it used to be done in the past. Here's a model. Give me a beautiful set of wax up teeth. You wax them up, and then okay, or they'll send a picture, and the doctor himself will use Photoshop to make it look really nice, and then send it to you like, this is what we want. Well, but this is not possible because of the anatomy of the patient. So how am I going to deliver on this now? And so when you can't deliver what you presented to the patient, then everyone is mad. The patient is unhappy, so is the doctor, and so are you, because you waste the work. So that would be my take on the whole situation.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
All right. So here the software asks for you to import pictures, and so it wants you to import a retracted image from the get-go. I like to just use, again, coming up with more workflow, I like to just use a smile picture. If I can see the patient's teeth when they smile, that's all I need. I don't want anything else. I don't think it adds very much because the information that you will gather from the retracted image I have in the scan. And so I can do it, so I can see where the gingival margins are and all that. So I'm going to find some spots where I can landmarks so that I can align the picture and the model. And then I get to rotate this and scale it by clicking and dragging those, which look very similar in the process that Ben was doing. And so I come up with an alignment as close to perfect as I can. Once I feel happy and confident that the alignment is good, I kind of do this to make sure that the teeth are not dancing between the picture and the model. It's just a last minute check to make sure things are great. Software tries to outline the lip. It is typically off, and that's something that I saw in the software Ben was using in 3Shape, that apparently it can be more accurate. So I like to, I don't trust software ever. I have to do this myself every time. You can add more points to this if you need to. And then in the next step, software asks for the retracted image, but we'll skip it. And so now we'll find our interpupillary line. And then the software gives us all this information. Again, the way that I like to do things, I don't typically like to use golden proportion rulers. I don't think that they're realistic. So I get rid of the information that I don't need to use here. And all I'm really worried about would be the midline. If the doctor tells me that the patient's current midline isn't good. Okay, so these are what I determine to be, I personally like to call these like clinical decisions. These are decisions the doctor needs to make, and then convey that over to me so that I can come up with what the doctor wants. Now, if he wants to have a discussion about it, we can, but he should be able to tell me, hey, I like where the midline is shifted one way or another. And then that should be about it. So after that, then this is what we do. This is where the magic happens, in my opinion. So we have our 3D views on the right-hand side and my 2D views on the left. And so whatever changes I make on one of the right-hand side, it changes my 2D image. And so I'm able to see exactly what's happening. And so by the time I'm done with this process, I should have teeth that are positioned in 3D space that follow the anatomy of the patient. And so the likeliness of me being able to deliver what I present to the doctor after this process is much higher than if I just start with a 2D image and then try to make that work into a 3D space. Okay. And so
Let me push
yes,
back on you, Daniel.
please.
You're a very skilled designer. I mean, so there's a compliment. Shouldn't you be able to take a 2D photo and understanding and with your best intelligence without a 3D scan to kind of understand what some limitations are as far as moving, or would you say you're really dependent on a 3D scan? Like, here's what I'm asking. If I'm a doctor, patient comes in for a cleaning. They're like maybe on the fence about veneers or smile design. So I snap a photo and I'm not sure if they're interested. So I'm just going to pay for a 2D smile design instead of paying for the smile design in the mock-up because I just want to show the patient what they could look like and to try to get them to accept treatment. What's your thought on that strategy?
Well, again, it's just my pushback on that argument would be, how are you managing the expectations? So yeah, I can use my intelligence and I can make assumption as to why teeth are there. But say, for example, this is a bridge and one of the preps is not exactly where it's showing me here in the picture because the previous technician did some tricks and was able to move midlines or whatever. And so now I try to deliver on something that cannot look like that, or there's some kind of limitation in the patient's anatomy. I want to be able to set the expectation based off of that rather than just how well you're going to look. So,
okay. So
yeah.
Case selection maybe is important. So let's say the patient's teeth, they're just going to do like minimal prep veneers, right? Like the patient's teeth aren't jacked up and rotated, like they're, a decent starting point. In that scenario, if it's like minimal prep veneers and the foundation is pretty solid, could we do 2D smile design predictably on that?
I guess you could. I just personally don't like to do it that way. So
I hear ya.
I've never done a case where it's just a 2D image.
Okay. So, and how many years you been designing, Daniel? So after 14 years of designing, what you've concluded is, doctor, will you please just give me both?
Yeah.
That way we know what the outcome is.
Yeah. I think we're trying to add, with all the respect, I think we're trying to add an unnecessary, we're trying to skip a step that doesn't need to be skipped. It benefits no one.
Gotcha.
Especially now with intraoral scans. How long does it take to scan a patient? Maybe
totally.
another 10 minutes, 5 minutes.
Yeah, the cost of that scan is just time at this point. You're not using impression material and all that kind of stuff.
And so for a more predictable product, I just don't understand why a doctor wouldn't just go through the entire process and do it right the first time around.
Right.
Then
I agree with you completely from a lab standpoint, right? I think that, and I don't know it, and correct me if I'm wrong, does Exocad have an in-office software like that? They do. Okay. So like that smile design initially is really just, from my perspective, I agree with you completely. We would never bank on a 2D picture, right, to give us ultimately what we want. I think it's a tool that can be used chairside most effectively, exactly what we talked about, maybe in hygiene or, a quick assistant picture of kind of, is this something you're interested in? I think that's as far as we can take a 2D is literally a conversation starter. And it really needs to be worded delicately, right? To the patient of, this is
actual
a tool to show you something that is, this is something possible. We may want to increase your shade or brighten your shade a little bit, or maybe fix the tweak over here.
Yeah.
Is this something you would be interested in taking a look at? At least you could get a coverage of the cost of the mock-up design or what have you. And, there's some tools that we can use as well of doing an overlay. Daniel, I'm sure you've done quite a few of those, right? Where you don't actually prep any teeth, but you can still make a matrix and kind of, like a teaser, an overlay to put in and smile. But But yeah, I'm with you. There's no construction value to the 2D mock-up.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point, Ben. Setting expectations, right? If we are going to do a 2D mock-up with no 3D scan, then we should really make sure the patient knows that we're just showing a mock-up that may not be possible. If you're interested in something like this, let's take a 2D scan and we'll do a 3D mock-up and do the whole thing.
It's just a very slippery slope
this is where
of how you word that.
Yeah. This is where I'll
patient.
make a shameless plug, but this is the type of service I can provide. So if you know you're going to see a patient who you've thought about doing this with, you can tell me, hey, I need a smile design, and I'll have this ready in about 5 minutes for you. And so if you can make the patient wait an extra 5 minutes in the chair, I can come up with a smile design for you. And then you have your conversation start, right? But once you start the conversation, like we said at the very beginning, you're starting the conversation with the end product in mind.
Right.
So by the time I'm done here, if I send this and the patient loves it, well, this is exactly what you're going to get because my 3D shapes are in correct space and following your anatomy. So this is most likely what your end result will actually look like. And so I don't have to make any caveats, any fine print. Results may be ideal. This is it.
All right. Well, this was a worthy rabbit trail, I think. But Daniel, please proceed in the smile design steps here and show us the process in Exocad.
Okay. So then we would just go through the process of fine tuning the tooth placement. And again, you can make changes here, and then you can see the results here in the 2D image, or you can grab it here in the 2D image and see the results in 3D space.
Okay, so this is pretty crazy. Hold on. So you're moving a tooth in 3D space.
Yeah.
And it's adjusting your 2D mockup.
Correct.
Holy crap. That's pretty awesome. Ben, can 3Shape do this?
And then you can do it vice versa. So if you realize that there's something you don't like in the 2D image and you make changes here, then you can see how it changes in 3D space simultaneously. So
yeah, now I can show that a little bit of that visually within the design portion of it.
But they don't mirror
but
movement
it's not
left
intermixed
or right.
together. No.
And so this way I can address both problems at once. So once I feel my 2D image looks good, and for the sake of the demo, I'm not going to detail the design, but if I like the way things look on the 2D image and I see my 3D image, okay, everything looks exactly where it should be, then we're good to go. Now, you have lots of different tools here. For example, you can do measurements and see the dimensions of each individual tooth, and you can see how symmetric your design is being. You can say mirror movements, for example. So if I make changes to this lateral, then the other lateral will also move the same amount. And then I'm able to create a perfectly symmetrical that design if you're into that. And once you're done with this process, then you can say, okay, show me the preview now in color. Okay, you can zoom out and look at that. And obviously this color is way off. In the following step, you get to see the before and after, but you also get to change a lot of different things about the coloring. So you can use this 2D image shade tab and you can like mix by clicking and dragging from one shade to another. Or you can say, let me do custom color selection. And now you can use the droplet tool and extract colors from the patient's teeth. So for the base color, I like to use like a very dark stain. And then for the highlights, I like to use where the light is reflecting back. And that typically gives me a closer shade, in this particular case, but it gives me a closer shade of what the patient actually has. You can then play with, say, the shininess of the tooth, so you can match it a little bit better to the shade of the picture, and then you have your before and after.
So Daniel, let's say the doctor says, give me a bleach shade, like a BL1. How close can you get that here?
So quite honestly, the colors I don't like very much, just because if you get them a real shade, a real bleach shade, then it just looks like this, right? And so you're always going to go just a tiny bit darker so that you can see all the details. So when you show the preview, it actually looks like teeth, not just like you cut out the picture with a white background.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's the way that you will go about it. After that, then, for example, you can say lights and shades, and you can, for example, move the source of the light so that you can cast shadows on different parts of the teeth to help you shade match things. You can change the brightness of the image to create less of a contrast problem, depending on the shading that you're going for, et cetera, et cetera. If you find the shade that you like, then you can go back to the previous step, and now you can do your modifications with the teeth with that shade, and maybe that helps you figure out exactly where things ought to go for aesthetics, for aesthetic reasons.
All right, so why don't you just dial this into kind of where you would like it if you were going to deliver this back to the doctor? Where would you take this case?
Sorry, say that again.
Yep, just wrap up the design here to a point where you would say, this is probably where I would take it to give this back to the doctor to show the patient.
So again, asking for grace. I didn't detail this as much as I should for the purpose of the demo. After that, you will finish the smile design will flow. You get all this information. You can print out if you want it. So it's a huge PDF with all the different details. But after that, then we get thrown back to where we were before we started the smile design. So we're back here. All right. And so as far as I'm concerned, my design is done at this point. So I can grab this and put it all together. And then I can use Exocad's Denshare network to create a 3D preview of this specific design. Now, one of the limitations of this tool for this purpose is that it won't transfer the shade that you've created. So when I send this preview to the doctor, I will take a screenshot of my design for shade purposes, if the shade is important, and then I link it. I send this link over to him. This link works without any specific software. You just have to have a relatively updated browser, and this is what you get from that.
So it's like a 3D preview. Does the doctor need to have an account and log in anywhere, or it's just sort of an encrypted link that he can see?
He can open it on his tablet, phone, computer. He could open it right there in front of the patient if he wanted to show. I don't know why it's taking so long to load. But then this is what you get. So fully interactive 3D preview where you can turn off different parts of the design, and you can play with, transparency so you can see where things are. And then when communication happens at this point, from this point forward between doctor and I, we're not talking about, well, I think, no, he can pull this up. I can log into his computer. He can show me exactly what his issue was with my design. Oh, I want this change because, look, I only have this much space or whatever it may be. We can get really detailed in the information I want to share back and forth because of this. By the time we're here, at least I'm happy with the design, right? Obviously, I have to get it approved by doctor and patient. But once that happens, then we can go back and forth and fine tune the little details that were left out by one or the other.
Awesome. So the payload or the products you're going to give the doc, you can give him a PDF, or you might send him screenshots and this URL, this link that he can click and interact with the case. Anything more to say about the smile design process here?
Not about it specifically. Like I mentioned at the beginning, from this point, I could come up with either a model for a matrix. This could turn into eventual preps, and now my teeth are already in place for the crowns. So there's no changing, there's no redesigning or repositioning of anything. It's just, it goes straight on the preps. I can come up with a snap-on solution so that the doctor can print something really quickly and slide it on the patient's teeth real quick so they can see themselves. So there's tons of avenues or routes we can go as a final product from this point forward.
Okay. We'll come back. We'll wrap up with the 3D model in Exocad, but I want to go back to Ben in 3Shape. Ben, what's the payload from 2D smile design? Like, what are you delivering to the doctor for him to view and approve the smile design?
Yeah, so it's literally this. I don't want to say the same thing, but
Dan, if you want to stop sharing. and then let Ben share his screen.
Oh, yep.
Right, so yeah, you're just going to get pictures with that, with the smile design. Now, I could send the actual case back to, if they have trios, I could send back to that. I mean, that's ultimately what it is. You know, they can just reopen that and do everything that we just did. Or
So
you
they'll
have all
a
these.
3-dimensional view inside of Trios.
That is correct.
If
That
they
is correct.
don't
Now
have
there is
Trios,
I'm not
then-
sure how to be honest with you. I know with Dental Manager, like I can send a link, just like Daniel showed you, exact same thing, you know, 3-dimensional. I'm not sure if I can do that from Unite or not to send an actual preview link out of that. But jumping into our smile design, so ours are, as you know, a little bit different. So completely different modules. I would say that's a downfall really between the two, not being an Exocad user and nothing against 3Shape, but it'd be nice to be able to change workflow, right? So in order for me to do this, we just set up an order here and basically same thing, select the teeth, and then I can just bring in the photos within here. Now there are options to send it within the design itself, but once we get all of this in here, I like to bring it up. We have the alignment and everything, not to go through all of this, but what I like to do is bring in an extra maxillary. Daniel, I'm assuming you can bring in extras as well.
Yes, sir.
Just to use them. Because a lot of times when I'm doing a mock-up, you know, I'll bring all of the teeth in and I may actually just modify the initial. And what I do with that, meaning sorry about that. I will flatten out some of these teeth on the facials a little bit. So I literally can do one of those, just a quick mock-up that the doctor can use. I find these very useful for the patient when you can do an actual wax up like this on top of existing teeth. Now, obviously you can't do that everywhere. This particular patient has fairly straight teeth, right? So I would have to bring everything out a little bit. But I'm trying to wrap all this back into what you were saying, Daniel, at the end, how you can do multiple things out of that, right?
Yeah.
So kind of the same scenario as far as moving all of these teeth around exactly where I want them. You know, once I get this, I would actually have to save this and then open another order, right? To do, let's say, shell temps or something like that. I can't just click a button and do it within here, which I believe is what you're explaining with Exocad. That would be super
With
nice
some
to have.
limitations, but yeah, you can alter your workflow. So
Okay. In a sense, I like that. And I'm trying not to make this a whole comparison or anything, but I do kind of like having everything within here. You know what I mean? So I have one, I'm just more simple-minded that way. Like I have an order that has my wax up. I have an order that has my preps in it. So I'm sure it's just a different way of organizing things around. But, and Daniel, I think the kind of the same thing, same style that you do, I like to do of just, you know, I can choose these libraries, right? Different shapes of teeth that I want. I'm choosing this Matt Roberts because that's what we chose in the initial smile design.
sure.
But then I just like to float these on top of, you know, these teeth. And then what I'll come back in and do and actually just remove a lot of this to hide it completely and get there. So we'll hide all of that, right?
Yeah.
And then from here, I can just make a matrix off of this, print a model off of this. I can send this along the doctor. I can message directly, again, with that 3D link for them to look at and communicate back and forth. But I go in a little bit more detail in the linguals here like this to remove so that this can show prep design, you know, and that's a conversation to have with your doctor as well. If we have any overlaps, like this particular 8 and 9 are overlapped some here, we're going to have to break this contact, right? We'll have to do a slice prep between the two of these in order to have restoration material back here. So again, it's a great tool. End result for temporaries, realistic temporaries, as well as a base design for when we do go to finals.
Yeah, no, Dr. Narain loves doing 3D mock-ups, you know, pre-preparation. That way the patient can feel on their lip the length and some other things, and they can have this like live 3D preview that they can wear around the house for a couple days. Their significant other can see it and like it. And then that way, when they go to do their prep appointment, everybody knows that this final outcome is achievable and that the patient likes the final outcome.
Right. And this is what I was saying. Yes, we kind of have that as far as lining all of that up, but I can't rotate this around once I'm in this view. Right. So I can visually see those within, but that would be the downfall, is that I can't contour it while it's in.
Okay. So 3Shape currently is kind of a 2-step workflow where you're going to do smile design and you can do the 3D mock-up design and you can overlay them, but you can't do them live and in parallel like you can in Exocad.
Well, exactly. And I think the reason for that was really the smile design was meant for a quick and easy chairside conversation starter.
Makes sense.
Do you feel that as well? Because you really can't get a full mock-up like that from just the 2D. But the information is definitely great for a lab to have, when we do get to this stuff.
Yeah, if a doctor has Trios, is smile design included with their Trios license to be able to do a chairside mock-up?
Correct.
Okay, and so then you could train the doctor or staff on how to do a quick 2D smile design using Trios. Obviously, you got to manage expectations, but then if the doctor wants something more realistic and a reliable outcome, you would then want a scan to then finish the whole case.
Correct. And even if they have photos and pictures within, like this particular case, we have the 2D pictures along with the scans, but this would all be in the same area. So you could really go back to existing patients that you already have, added photos, or just go ahead and grab these photos. You can literally just select one, select smile design, and it takes you directly into the software.
So you're in Trio software right now, correct?
I'm in the Unite software, correct. But yes,
nice.
it would be in there as well.
All right, so we have the predictable outcome here now. We've done a 2D smile design, 3D mock-up. We can deliver a printable model back to the doctor if they have an in-house printer. It's pretty easy to print a model and do a putty matrix to be able to do 3D mock-ups. That's pretty easy, or a good lab can print a model for you. Daniel, if a doctor wanted you to train him or her or their staff on smile design, how long would that take you to train them? What kind of engagement would they need to learn the basics of smile design?
For the basics, maybe 1 to 2 hours, depending on their understanding of CAD generally. But 1 to 2 hours should be about the right amount of time to get the basics of this.
How many of the clients that you work with like to do their own smile design versus just send it to you to do for them?
If you have a good command of the software, then it will take you a long time to do this. It could take you, and if you're trying to show the patient something really quickly, then I don't think it's worth it. But if that's not the case, if you have a couple of days to do it, then yes, there's no problem. I would say the majority of my doctors send me the smile designs so I can do it for them.
Makes sense. I mean, value of the doctor's time is
Right.
for sure valuable. They don't want to be spending 20, 30 minutes designing a case. I mean, that's a long time for their time. Daniel, in your experience, when you go through this process, 2D smile design, 3D mock-up, what is the % of time that the patient loves the outcome? How often do you have to do a remake when you go through this process?
Well, so going back to the beginning, so as long as good information is sent from the very beginning, the best part of this is hearing that the patient cries. And they're like, oh my gosh, I love this. That is probably the most fulfilling part of my job. When we don't have that information from the get-go, then the patient gets to get picky, right? And we all know that we're going to get those patients anyway. No matter what you do, they're not going to be happy. But it is a lot easier if the conversation about details was had from the very beginning by the doctor. And then that is forwarded to me, and we can give the patient exactly what they had in mind or very close to it.
You know, it'd be awesome is if the patient cried when you delivered the 3D mock-ups in their mouth, pre-preparation, right?
Right.
Because then you know you're 3/4 of the way there, right? Like if they love the mock-up that they're wearing, the length and width and the way it feels on their lips, then we know we have confidence that the patient's going to love the final outcome.
Yeah, when you have all that communication down in the beginning, and because when you go to temp stage, that's when you're going to get the real emotion. We used to see that a lot when doing live patients. So you just on prep day, walk with those temps.
Yeah, dentistry can be stressful on doctors and technicians. So by following these steps, we can reduce remakes and increase the odds the patient's going to cry and hug you and say, I love it. And they're not going to get picky and say, well, what about this or what about that? Or, start, asking for changes. Awesome,
you
guys.
get those patients regardless, but you want to minimize that as much as possible.
Well, thank you. And doctors out there, if you need any help designing in 3Shape or in Exocad, Ben and Daniel can help you. Hopefully this has been insightful and enlightening. Thanks, you guys.
One last thing, Rob, just for the doctors to know that you don't have to be in 3Shape and only design in 3Shape or Exocad and only design Exocad. It could be, you can crisscross all you need.
That is a good point. If you are a Trios user, you can still work with Daniel Portal.
Correct.
Right. And if you are a Itero user, you can work with Ben Guilford, right? And it's the CAD software the designer is using is not dependent on the iOS scans and the inputs. Although the Trios workflow to a dental system user will definitely have some conveniences added to the workflow, like messaging and seeing the Smile Design native in the Trios software and all that kind of stuff. Perfect. All right. Docs, you can find Ben and Daniel on rebel3d.com. We're happy to help in your 3D journey and increase the outcome of your patient's happiness, right? The chance that they're going to love the case, they're going to cry, and they're going to hug you will go up if you follow some basic processes here. And look forward to helping you.